Okay, here is a little tutorial about how to adjust for diaper allowances in a pattern. Typically, if you're working with a pattern that's a 3T or a 4T, it has a diaper allowance in it. If it's just a plain 3 or a 4, it does not have a diaper allowance in it. The other difference is that if you're working with a plain child's fabric or a pattern, if you're working with a kid's pattern or a child's pattern that's like a 3 or a 4, they typically tend to be a little bit taller in height and taller in the back waist, back length measurement. That's the measurement from the base of your neck to your natural waist. So if you're working with a toddler who is just out of diapers and you don't want the pattern to be taller, then what you can do is take out this diaper allowance. Now, the first place where they add a little bit of allowance is to the side seam. Now in modern patterns, and we're talking like the last 10 years or so, that measurement is really fairly small. If you're working with an older pattern, of course, it would be quite a bigger measurement. So what you need to do is you need to measure the child's waist, and then you need to mark in on your pattern 5/8 of an inch. That's the seam allowance on this pattern, and 5/8 of an inch from the side. Now I'm going to measure between my two marks on the waistline mark. See it right there? So I'm going to measure from there along the waistline mark to there, and I'm going to take that measurement and times it by 2, and then I'm going to add that number to the same thing on the back, or I guess this is the front. That was the back, this is the front. 5/8 inch in and 5/8 inch in, and along the waistline between those two marks I'm going to measure. I'm going to times that by 2, and then I'm going to add that to the measurement that I got from the back. That'll give you a waist measurement, a final waist measurement. Now, if you're making jeans, you probably want them a little more fitted. If you're working with knits, you can, add a 1/2 inch or so to the pattern, or to the measurement, to get your final measurement. So once you've determined what your measurement is and how much you want to take off, if any at all, if these newer patterns you don't even really have to adjust that at all unless you're working with a cotton or something like that, and you want it to be fitted or something. But once you figure out what that is, the difference, like say you wanted it to be 21 inches, but with all your measurements you figure out the pants are going to come out to be 22 inches, then your difference would be 1 inch. So then you would take the amount that you want off, which would be the 1 inch, and you would divide it by the number of seams that you're going to have in the waistband. In this case, because we're having a front piece and a back piece, you're going to have 4 seams. So you're going to divide that inch by 4. So you're going to take a 1/4 inch off each seam. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. That's to adjust for the waist. Now, I usually don't do that because I think a 1/4 of an inch is too much of a hassle for me, and I'm usually working with knits, or, I decided that toddler clothes, you don't really want them to fit close like you do normal adult clothes, and so I'd rather have a little bit of room. Plus they grow so fast, so I usually don't worry about that measurement. But if it's a big amount for you and you decide you want to take that out, you can. Now the other place that there is a diaper allowance is in the crotch depth. So I'll get some pattern paper and then I'll show you how to draft that. Okay, here I am back. What I did is I actually took my daughter and I measured. You're going to need a crotch depth measurement. I measured from just above, right about her belly button, just above her belly button, underneath the crotch, and to the back, the same place as her belly button. So you want to make sure that that's even parallel across. So from the back through the legs and back to the belly button. And then I kind of let my tape droop to where I thought it would be comfortable for her to move. And I took that measurement, because you don't want it exactly, because then they're never going to be able to move in them. So I gave her a little bit of wiggle room, I guess you would say. And I came up with 18.5 inches. So what I did is I took where my waistline starts on this pattern, and then I marked it, and then I marked 5/8 of an inch in to take my seam allowance off. And I stopped it 5/8 of an inch in from the size ending on my pattern because I don't want to measure this leg seam. So I took that, I marked that, and then I took this measurement with a cloth tape, and make sure that you're using the inside of the tape, not the outside of the tape, to measure so that you get an accurate measurement. So I kind of laid my cloth tape around there, and I got that measurement. And then I did the same for the back. 5/8 of an inch in because I don't want the leg seam, 5/8 of an inch down, and then I just measured what the actual measurement of the garment is going to be. And I stopped at the waistline mark because I don't want to know what all that is. So I just stopped at the waistline mark. I added those two measurements together. Then I decided that to take the diaper allowance out, I needed 6/8 of an inch taken off, which is 3/4. But I like to talk in eighths because then it's easier to divide. So I'm going to take half of that, 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch up. I traced them out on my pattern paper, and I love freezer paper. That's what I use. It's cheap. So I went ahead and I drew out my patterns, and then I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch up because that's half. Because remember, you're going to be taking that off each side of the crotch, and there's two pieces that will go together for that when you put the fronts and backs together. Okay, and then when you're drawing this out on your paper, you need to make a mark where the rest of these patterns, where the rest of these sizes start taking off at, because that's actually where you want to start your crotch depth at. You don't want to take the measurement off of this inside because that will affect how much of your waistband you have, how much of the waist around that you have. So you don't want to take any off of there unless you have already determined that you're going to. Then you would take it off of the whole, of just this part to here, and then come back and do the crotch depth like I'm doing right now. So right now we've got this crotch depth right here. So we're going to make a mark there, and that's where we're going to start adjusting from. And you really just need to kind of fudge it in. And if you're kind of in a hurry and the child isn't there and you know you're going to take a pretty standard diaper allowance off, what I do is, like, if I'm working with the size 3 right here, I will lay my pattern up, and usually what ends up happening is that this ends up being like a size 2. So a lot of times I will just, instead, if there's a diaper allowance and I don't want it, what I will do is just use this crotch measurement the next size smaller. So if I was measuring a 3, I would just use a 2, and I would just draw the 2 in for the crotch depth right there instead of the 3. That's the quick, easy way to take out a diaper allowance, especially if you're not worried about the waist and all that. And usually on most kids' patterns, it's not really worth it to go through all the waist measurements. But you might want to double check it if you have questions or you see that the pattern needs to be adjusted more. Okay, so what do you do if the pattern is one piece? Instead of having a side seam, it's just one piece and the crotches are on the sides. Well, what you do is you go ahead and lay your pattern and trace it, and then just scoot it over so you get the other side. You want to make sure you have one front and one back, and just match that side up and go ahead and draw that in. And then you're kind of, on these you might have to just kind of guess, but you can see where it's straight, and then all of a sudden it starts to curve, and that's where you want to adjust your crotch at. So then you can make those 2 marks and then just do the same, just like what you did with the other one, and make that line in depending on how much you want to take out of the crotch depth for the diaper. And then just cut along there, and so then when you're cutting, you'll come out to here and you'll just kind of ease that in the same line that your leg is going, just like that. Okay, really easy, not hard to do at all.